I'm Seth Grimes. I'm the organizer I'm the facilitator of the TEDCO AI Roundtable and the organizer of the Maryland AI Meetup and the Baltimore Tech Meetup. Welcome to those of you who have joined us today. Let me introduce the program by just telling you about the organizations in case you're new to these programs and what we're going to try to accomplish today. So TEDCO is the Maryland Technology Development Corporation. This is the 18th session of the Maryland AI Roundtable. That was originated by TEDCO. They run maybe half dozen roundtables in various topics to focus on artificial intelligence in Maryland. TEDCO is sort of a government-sponsored venture capital organization, but they also do a lot of industry promotion. And most of our roundtable sessions, that is all of them until February, were in person in Columbia, Maryland at TEDCO's offices, and then we went online. And separately, I had started the Maryland AI Meetup in the fall of 2018, and I took over the Baltimore Tech Meetup. And we had been running in-person programs in Baltimore. And so I thought, well, so long as the roundtable is going online, let's open up the sessions to their greater community. So we do have Maryland AI, Baltimore Tech meetup programs that are more conventional, that involve a presentation, one or two presenters with slide decks and all of that kind of stuff. Those are really cool. So let me say that if you'd like to give that kind of presentation, it can be short, as short as 10 minutes if you just want to show a product or service, or a longer talk of up to 50 minutes, 45 to 50 minutes, you should let me know. Message me via the Meetup platform or send me a note and we can talk about doing that. This session today is a bit different. The roundtable sessions are very much discussion oriented. We have had a core set of participants, and we've added additional ones as time has gone by, and other people, of course, have dropped out. And the common point is that these are individuals working, often CEOs, usually CEOs, sometimes technologists, sometimes people supporting artificial intelligence in Maryland. By supporting, I mean people who are attorneys or VCs, just to discuss technology or business topics, and preferably the confluence of the two of those, technology, business, market opportunities, both technical and product and service. And we try to support one another and learn from one another. So a number of our programs, probably about 2/3 of the roundtable programs now, we do have special expert guests who work in artificial intelligence in and around Maryland. And so I'm thrilled to have Sally Grant with us today as an expert guest. Her expertise is in cybersecurity, and in particular in the government and intelligence realm. We'll get into that a lot more, of course, as we go along. But the programs are meant to have something of an appeal for everyone, no matter what area you work in. If we have roundtable participants who are working in life sciences and medicine, trying to, for instance, apply artificial intelligence for medical diagnostic purposes. Other people are using AI for distance learning, training online, and things like that. We have participants who are developing AI platforms for general purposes or specialized purposes, such as team collaboration. So we're going to be focusing today on cybersecurity and related topics and government, but we're going to try very much to talk about considerations that apply to everyone relating to data science, to ethics, to bias in AI, and we'll tap the expertise of Sally. So Sally, I see your video on. Why don't you just say hello to everyone?
Thank you, Seth. Hello to everyone. I appreciate the time. I run pretty fast, super speed. Just to let you know, Seth, Marcus Fowler is joining us from Darktrace, former naval officer and with the CIA. I consider Marcus one of my in-depth advisors in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence machine learning. I do have a very tight agenda for you all today. Marcus does have to drop at 4:30. So Seth, if you could make Marcus Fowler a panelist, what I would love to do is just talk about my bio and credit the folks who have gotten me where I am today, and then probably move right into.
Let me just interrupt to say that when Sally is ready, I will enable people who are regulars and to participate, but everyone should feel free to use the Zoom raise hand feature, and I will convert you into a panelist so that you'll be able to participate fully. And we really, Sally just said she has a tight agenda, and I've gone over that with her, and it looks really interesting and exciting, but we really do want to have discussion here. So use the raise hand feature, and while Sally's talking, if anything that you want to raise, use the Q&A feature to enter your questions, but don't interrupt her while she's speaking. So Sally, continue, and I will enable Marcus.
Okay, thank you. You know, thanks, Seth, for this opportunity. I don't think I would be here today without my incredible cybersecurity journey, and then now my new pathway and chapter into artificial intelligence, machine learning. I think the background here in Maryland with Fort Meade has given us all the opportunity to work and share tools and capabilities in that defensive and offensive environment. You know, I credit all of my teammates and former colleagues who have served with US Cyber Command and NSA, and certainly now my chief data science team, who has also served with the Department of Defense. We really are trying to take those research and developed, prototyped, absolutely deployed tools of machine learning, what we call, you know, predictive analytics for real-time rapid response to the agile warfighter. These tools and capabilities, which I do want Marcus to touch upon a little bit, we are trying to get these out to industry for better decision-making, for economics, for business use cases. Due to my work in the Department of Defense, Seth wanted me to focus on cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, machine learning. We do know the automation for looking all that big data for the alerts and the alarms for malware is critical right now. I think that Darktrace is heading up that sphere for all of us across the globe. And I love, Seth, that you wanted me to be the guest speaker, but I love having guest speakers. So Marcus, I know you have a few moments. Thank you for joining us.
Can I ask each of you to just tell us briefly, take a moment or two, just tell us how you got to where you are, because we need to understand who you are. In other words, I'm not going to read something that goes over your career and credentials, but I'd like you to hit on the highlights.
Sure. So Marcus Fowler. So I'm. Oh, sorry. You go, Sally. You've already gone. You continue to go, Sally. Wrap that your comments up.
How'd you get where you are?
So I think my work started out within the Maryland community, Cyber Maryland and the NSA Day of Cyber, along with some work with JSOC and US Cyber Command. And I credit all of my veterans that I worked for. Marcus?
Sure. Hey, Seth. So I'm the Director of Strategic Threat at Darktrace. I left the CIA about 14 months ago. So not that long from after 25 years in the public sector. In terms of where I landed, it's actually it was a strange path, because I actually joined the CIA and was very focused on targeting counterterrorism work, and then seeing how terrorists were using the internet. I started to gravitate towards cyber, and I started to gravitate towards both our vulnerability as well as our adversaries' vulnerabilities within that space, both from an influencer disinformation standpoint, but also from a access cybersecurity standpoint. So I ended up getting very interested in that, generating towards how we were enabling emerging technologies. I really started to fall in love with how emerging technologies could be applied to mission, not just because they were very cool or because they were emerging or because they were next gen, but the impact they could have to mission when done properly, when you understood the direction that you wanted to take it. That led me into machine learning and artificial intelligence. And then Darktrace is an artificial intelligence company applying that to the cybersecurity space, both the unsupervised learning as well as supervised learning. And that's really what brought me to where I am today. Not a traditional path, I think, in terms of my exposure to AI ML, but I think it was a natural extension of my curiosity and interest in how to solve complex problems with the hybrid approach of human power, right, and training and all that, and the enabling technology.
Great.
I will touch just a little bit on how And first off, I am in Silver Spring, Maryland. So, I didn't come out of nowhere, I am part of the, tribe, as it were. For me, what was actually most novel about a cybersecurity approach and the application of AI, and one of the journeys that I went over the last 14 months was I left from the national security standpoint, where you very much have to be threat actor centric, right? Threat actor, attack vector, very threat centric, because you can't cover all US persons and interests globally. To, while I'm looking across industries and companies, that it's very much become, it's a much more bound problem and achievable to actually turn that from looking external to the threat to looking internal, and using AI to understand and enforce normal, right? The normal pattern behavior. For us, that's an application of unsupervised learning, or so, not external training data sets, but rather models and classifiers, in order to create that understanding of normal at a very granular but also evolving level. We actually saw it perform very well during extreme change. So but that's just one of the application sets. But I know you want to make this much more of a conversation. So I'm happy to answer questions or approach.
Marcus, I do have a question that constantly I'm in awe with how Darktrace performs. What we're looking at is the adversarial attacks coming in at high speed. And could you give us a real example of how Darktrace's capability is looking at the vulnerabilities coming in at that automation, so that reporting and predictability gets down to the customer, the head of the SOC, so that decisions can be changed, can be made, defense walls can be strengthened, or really my favorite, as you know, at offense, right? How do we take that next level to the offensive environment?
Sure. So I two areas that we have seen the AI really play a role is staff augmentation, supercharging that investigation with autonomous triage behind the scenes. So actually here was the application of supervised learning. So watching our own analysts over about 4+ years, tens of thousands of events, to create the ability to constantly be looking and investigating. Because we all know for cybersecurity, there's a lot of alert fatigue. There's a lot of false positive concerns. If you're having that rich investigation happening, then that limited time, a human can put fingers on keyboard. They're starting from a point of action rather than the kind of the initial kernels of investigation. That commodity, that heavy lifting work has already happened behind the scenes and actually been narrated to an extent and provided start points. That has been a huge place where I know a number of our clients have leaned over the last 6 months because of all the distraction, all the uncertainty, all the fires of maintaining normal business operations while trying to ensure security. That critical maximizing fingers on keyboard staff augmentation played a big role. And the other is autonomous response, letting the actual AI take the action to quarantine something in its earliest moments. If you think about either insider threat or ransomware, right? Seconds, minutes matter. So being able to quarantine something and then alert the human, or even do human confirmation mode. Yes, Seth.
Are you able to give us a few examples, scenarios? I think examples would help us understand the kind of situations you're talking about.
Sure. Recently with a large, actually, gas provider, we saw the early stages of an effort to actually, even better than that would be WannaCry. WannaCry, everybody knows WannaCry. A great example is that one. We had 2 hospitals in the UK. Both were using what we call the enterprise immune system, but that visibility, that unsupervised learning. They both detected WannaCry, even though no one had seen it. It was 0-day. They didn't need to know what it was. They didn't need to be able to label it or signature it, to be able to see that it was doing something in the environment they've never seen before. The hospital that was running autonomous response it was a non-event, right? WannaCry was basically a non-event because it was quarantined through an TCP, an IP reset at the network level at the very earliest stage, in which they were able to kind of prevent that from going any further. While the other hospital, which saw the alert, yet all hands on deck to respond to that WannaCry event, and they were on top of it, it still took them about a half a day, right? So if you're talking about the response time, we did that half a day, especially for a hospital. We look at some of the more recent cyber attacks. We had an individual die in Germany as a result of a ransomware attack, and some of these others, half a day is a long time. Another good example, sorry.
No, right, exactly. One more example, and then I want to chime in about adversarial AI and some of my counter misinformation propaganda campaigns.
Perfect. Yeah, so one that I think is kind of related to the current state of COVID and beyond. Just we could also talk about the novel spear phishing attacks and those that are more social engineering driven than they are malware or kind of executable, because those impersonation emails are really critical or really dangerous. The other, we saw a company that put a bunch of biometric thermometers across their company, right? Because they wanted to be measuring temperature before people accessing certain doors and this and that. Well, immediately when they turned those things on, Darktrace, through the visibility, was able to see them beaconing out to China. Now, those are probably just updates, maybe some data transfer and stuff like that, but and probably not malicious on its face, but certainly a vulnerability. And here's some of that, really expanding threat landscape from both a, IoT that we need to do our day jobs now with thermometers and all of this, as well as, different devices or how we're expanding our network. Before I hand it over to you, Sally. Oh, go ahead, Sally.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think, Seth, I wanted to do a shout out for, this is the cybersecurity angle of AI ML. When we get to the warfighter and we're asked to support our friends in the intelligence community, we're looking right now at some priorities. One is adversarial AI. Two, very important, are counter disinformation propaganda campaigns, the deep fakes. Three, which is very interesting to me, this is very machine learning based, it's called polluting data. If our data is coming into a platform and we are asking our user analysts to look at that for augmented decision-making purposes, for reporting up to command and control, if that data has been polluted, that is something that we're very concerned about. So how do we have eyes on the space to what the data is? And then going back to security, and Marcus, I do know you have to jump. Going back to security for a minute, right now we're focused on that encryption of data in the cloud or encryption of data in the storage spot. So always looking at that security as we travel into this incredible AI ML trajectory for the domain and how we, really approach predictive analytics.
So it seems like a lot of your work is around anomalous behaviors as opposed to expected and typical behaviors. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And to Sally's point, if you think about offensive AI, I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges when AI starts to be not adversarial, so much poisoning of the AI, but AI used by the attacker. I think scale and speed are a concern, but unpredictability, as we've seen in all that AI versus human, whether it's Go or StarCraft or even the most recent fighter jets, it wasn't just that they beat the human; they beat the human in ways that we didn't even think they would be able to win. And that's a very scary space when you talk about the inability to predict. And that's why I get very concerned when we start focusing our security on threat action prediction.
Yeah. So,
thank you very much, Marcus. I'm going to let you drop. I know we have a lot of other speakers. There is a woman here today. Thank you, Marcus. That was really helpful. Hope you can participate with Seth at another time.
sure, let's talk about that.
Yes,
one thing I'd like to do, I know Anna Wheeler is here. Anna, you just have a few minutes before your 4:30 next meeting. You're back at 4:45. Anna has an incredible story about human trafficking, which is dealing with artificial intelligence. I wanted to catch Anna. I know we have 8 minutes, but I think that's a perfect time. Anna's work, she is former Army. She's one of my heroes in the space every day. Her background is cybersecurity, so going with your theme, Seth, but now she's with Giant Oak, which is doing absolutely incredible initiatives in the AI ML space. Anna's work in human trafficking, I do think of my DoD friends in two forms. One, supporting the warfighter, but two, for the DoD humanitarian efforts. And I believe that human trafficking is part of that. And if you could just take a few minutes and talk about human trafficking work using AI, I think that'd be very interesting to the roundtable here.
Sure. Thank you, Sally. So, the biggest thing that AI brings to the table is the ability to process massive amounts of data. So it can make connections that a human can't, because a human can't understand the massive amounts of all of the different pieces. So Giant Oak was actually born out of a DARPA program, or inspired by a DARPA program that was counter human trafficking in the Middle East, because that's how they were funding terrorism. And one of the things that they realized was the AI was able to look at publicly available information, so things that anyone could look up, and make correlations that nobody else could. To include, the USDA was publishing the price of different produce to try to convince people in the Middle East to stop growing poppies. And so the AI was able to make a connection that the price of grapes in northern Afghanistan could actually be used as a correlation to Al-Qaeda movements through the central portion. And the reason for that was grapes were grown in the south. And if Al-Qaeda was active on a very few roadways that those families could take, then those grapes wouldn't move and the price would go up. So by having an AI be able to make that connection, that it would take a truly savant analyst to notice or even know to look there, that's been a huge piece. So because that's kind of our roots, that's something that we have been looking at for quite a few years, ever since the company's been established. And now we use that for bulk vetting and screening. So publicly available information to basically look through large quantities of people and data and companies to really alert the end user or the analyst on what they're finding of interest. So we recently did a pilot with a nonprofit called Deliver Fund. And Deliver Fund is a counter-human trafficking organization that focuses specifically on the trafficker. Their COO is very upfront about what you can take trafficked victims off the street, and that's hugely important, and get them help and everything. But there will always be more. If you take traffickers off the street and there are no more traffickers, that is how you stop trafficking. The difficulty with that is identifying those behaviors. So to really take it down to an economic overview, right? If this is a business, you have to rotate inventory, you have to move people, you have to keep, in this instance, sadly, the product, which are the trafficked victims, you have to keep them disoriented. So you want to keep them moved. You want to keep them in different locations. And the interesting part of that is human behavior is all behavior based. So what we do at Giant Oak is a customer says, I'm interested in a money launderer. I'm interested in insider threat. I'm interested in terrorism. We take the attributes of what they're looking for and turn that into a behavior cluster. So if you think about a scatter plot, and as Sally mentioned, I'm military, so that always is me with a shooting cluster, right? And you immediately turn around and say, okay, I want to know whoever looks close to that. And that doesn't mean that that person's bad or that person's guilty. It means an analyst should take a look. So if financial hardship is an indicator of insider threat, if personal strain or relationship strain is an indicator of insider threat, it doesn't mean that person's, is Snowden. It means that that person is who a negative influence would target to turn to do something that might not be in anyone's best interest. So that's what we look for. And the benefit to that is you can take, and the AI piece is you can take 100,000 entities, whether that entity is a person or a company, upload them in minutes. The algorithm then goes and crawls the open and deep web to bring back publicly available information along with purchased and proprietary data sources. And then that algorithm stack ranks it and gives you a score on how closely someone looks like that behavior. And now your analysts have a much smaller barrel of targets to fish in, with hopefully more fish. So instead of trying to catch, 1 of 10 fish in the ocean, let's make it a pond, and let's get in there and get something that's actually usable.
What you've been saying brings to mind a number of things in the world that I operate in, which is not military intelligence. I have spoken to people about human trafficking. Number one, the grapes example to trace Al-Qaeda movements reminds me of the use of alternative data. People on Wall Street in particular call it. The great example that they put forward, and this one has been widely used, so maybe you've heard it, is retail analysts looking at how full a parking lot of a Walmart is at using satellite imagery at holiday season. because that is a predictor. How full the parking lot is, that's a predictor of what the sales figures are going to be like. So alternative data is widely used across different industries. It's also interesting that you talked about what I would call hybrid methods. You, unlike Marcus a moment ago, where he talked about automated responses, you talked about using the outcomes to flag that an analyst should take a look at something. So I am a consultant, and so that's part of my mantra is hybrid systems, and don't just rely on lights out technology that is going to operate and respond automatically, that humans still need to be in the loop to apply human judgment and all of that. So I picked that up from what you were saying. And then also the presence of what you might call record fusion or data augmentation, the last thing that you were talking about, going out and creating a much richer data set based on the kernel of stuff that you're creating. So I'm seeing concepts that are very widely used across all applications of artificial intelligence, not only the kind of things that you're working on.
Absolutely, and to Zach Whitley's comment, the spurless correlations really come down to if you have an AI out there automating those pieces, which is something we were able to do in the DARPA program. But with us, it's you give us truth data, which what does a money launderer look like to you, right? Because a money launderer to a bank looks very different than a money launderer to Homeland Security, because they're looking for two very different correlations. A money launderer to a bank can just be trying to get personally wealthy. And a money launderer to Homeland Security is probably going for narcotics or human trafficking or some sort of other nefarious act. So it's some interesting pieces there. So in this instance, the AI is not making those correlations. What we're doing is we're using data science to build that behavior cluster. And then the scoring is how closely someone is related. What's
your toolkit look like?
We have a single platform. So our actual platform is called Ghost, Giant Oak Search Technology. It's up in, for the public sector, it's an AWS GovCloud. And it's portal. You log in to your domain, you manage your user base, you manage all of those types of things. The fact that it's AWS GovCloud also provides obfuscation for the investigator to, you know, if I'm managing my own site, then we turn around and if I can see who's scraping me or who's interested, it's going to be AWS. It's not going to be Giant Oak. It's not going to be the customer themselves. So things of that nature is the platform makes it very simple and easy. And then the analyst is able to work within the platform.
So I'm glad that it's AWS because Amazon Web Services, the sponsor of the meetups, they've underwritten it for the year. I didn't mention them before this moment because this is really a TEDCO session rather than a conventional meetup session. But in any case, yeah. So a lot of the stuff is going on the cloud, and in particular, we have been, transformation is the awareness that you can do things in a secure manner and on the cloud nowadays.
Absolutely. Well, Sally, I do need to drop. Thank you so much for the invitation. And thank you for
Thank you, Anna, as always.
Sally, do you want to continue?
Sure. So I put together an agenda today. I'm sure the folks online, one of the things that I find most interesting are use cases, business examples. The cyber AIL piece was covered. So what I'd like to do is move down. We did talk about our Department of Defense work, battle tactics, adversarial AI, data cleaning. We did go through the humanitarian part of our DoD space, which I think is just as important when we have huge catastrophic events that affect us on Earth. Our military is there to also act as first responders. Now what I'd like to do, because I'd like to go fast, is our federal civilian use cases. I did an analysis recently on the National Defense Authorization Act, looking specifically at artificial intelligence machine learning funding. If you are on the audience today and need more information, on the specific programs. Here is the money being allocated in NDAA FY21. NIST has 64 million being allocated, NOAA 10 million, National Science Foundation 868 million, Department of Energy 200 million, and the VA 15 million. These are all going into programmatic AI application funding. And if you need information how to work with those offices specifically, who to contact, and how you can be involved in deploying your capabilities, your tools, your folks, your systems management for these programs. I do know that across the board right now with our chief data officers for federal civilian agencies, they are asking for support and they are absolutely asking for help. I would like to take a moment right now to credit Cheryl Instagrad of the Department of Energy. Right now, she is one of my big time heroes. I'm just going to grab my Department of Energy notes for a minute here.
Okay, while Sally's doing that, let me reinforce that we would like to invite discussion. If you're not looking at the chat, I've been putting this across the chat, but just chat to me or use the raise hand feature if you would like to be video enabled to raise questions or make comments as Sally is speaking. Go ahead, Sally.
So we are continuing with our federal agency civilian discussion, crediting the Department of Energy right now to be a leader in AI, ML for the federal government. The Department of Energy's Artificial Intelligence program is led by Cheryl Instagrad. She's doing a phenomenal job with her team, and I quote, transforming DOE into a world-leading AI enterprise by accelerating, researching, developing, delivering, and training AI. Their acceleration and the delivery of AI-enabled capabilities scaled the department-wide development and impact of AI. They want to expand partnerships and support American AI leadership. Not only does Cheryl's team at Department of Energy with their 17 labs across North America, they want to be the ones who are sharing best practices, governance, security, and high-end ethics, looking at those biases. It's very important for the Department of Energy to be a leader here and help the other federal civilian agencies. We know now most of our federal civilian agencies do have our chief data officers, and one of the great men in Washington, D.C. right now, TEDCO, is the chief data officer of the Department of Agriculture. He is leading the Chief Data Officer Council, led by the Office of Management and Budget. Maria has taken over Suzette's job there. So if you want more information on how to get with TED, how to get with the council, how to talk to your federal agencies about your AI ML capabilities, just reach out to Seth and me. Seth can actually put my email and maybe my mobile in the chat.
Sure, I'll do that.
Fantastic. So one thing I would like to break here, does anybody have any questions or thoughts on federal civilian use cases? Because I can go over a couple of examples.
Sometimes people are reluctant. I've invited people to raise their hands and be enabled. Sometimes people are reluctant to do that. They're just trying to learn. I would say just go ahead and pick a couple that are really highlights, and think about what you can relate to people in terms of the opportunity that they might have as organizations that are working in the space or as potentially startups. And we do have people who are data scientists or training as data scientists who participate, who might be looking for an opportunity not to go out and get a contract, but for employment possibilities. So,
Right. So as I said earlier, NIST, NOAA, NSF, DOE, and VA have the largest budgets right now moving across the federal space. The AI core technologies in all the federal agencies are as follows: models for detecting latent or conceptual relationships with information. Number 2, pattern recognition and prediction. Number 3, language processing. Number 4, this is a real fun one that I love, image recognition. Number 5, computer vision, extracting insight and knowledge. And number 6, machine learning, analyzing those large data sets, either targeted training data or unlabeled operational data. I do believe augmentation is the key to success, whereby the data is coming in and the humans are making those decisions. There are just a few federal use cases. What we see in the federal agencies, one is called case management, manual data entry. How do we help our humans? How do we automate this process? These are what we call long processing times or inaccurate reporting and inconsistent outcomes. This is where AI ML can really come in handy. Customer service is number 2. We see a lot of this in the business and retail world. The chat boxes, the natural language processing, how to mitigate call volume. The chat services is something we are seeing day to day now in our world. The number 3 for our federal agencies is fraud and risk management. How do we identify emerging trends in fraud and abuse and fraudulent claims? And then the 4th is inspection maintenance. How do we look at our repairs and our safety concerns within the agencies? And number 5, which is my favorite right now, due to activity with our adversaries, is the supply chain. This is a hot topic in Washington, D.C. right now. It's not just who your manufacturers are, it's who your subcontractors are. And the supply chain is an important conversation. I'm not sure if John with System 1 is on the call today. I did invite him. If John, if you're on and you want to talk about supply chain, that could be something we'd love to hear your thoughts on.
Is that John Abales or?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Let me promote him. I will say it's interesting to hear what you're describing as opportunities. Is when we're talking about software and platforms, are these agencies large purchasers of off the shelf, or is there a lot of customization of off the shelf involved, or are they looking for bespoke solutions, or maybe all of the above?
Oh, customization, definitely, customization.
So they like to buy off the shelf, but do a lot of customization.
We find right now
that in machine learning, it's a huge amount of data work, data preparation, and then model training based on the data.
That's correct. I think and John could chime in here too. What we're learning right now is our chief data officers, our chief data scientists are bringing in their machine learning engineers and specialists and their data analysts. Sometimes those teams need a great deal of help with developing their models and maybe not. So when you come in to solve that problem, you identify that problem on how data can help. You will not know until you meet the team. So I always like to say, be ready for the customized approach, because you do want to be helpful to their mission sets. John, if you want to jump in that as well.
You're not muted. You can start your video if you wish. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. Sorry, you are muted. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Hi, John Ablis here. Sorry.
Very good. Go ahead. Thanks for joining us.
John, do you want to talk about what I was saying about Seth's question regarding customized work in the federal agencies versus a blanket approach?
Well, sorry, I just was hit by a call that came in, and so I lost the train of thought, but I can certainly talk about that. I mean, the problem is security has gotten to be very rote-worthy. There's a lot of overhead to it. So we have to think out of the box in order to move forward. I mean, that's why AI/ML holds such power to me.
What's your background? Can you say a little bit more about what role you play and for whom and how you got where you are?
Oh boy, you're asking a broad question. So
Well,
okay,
feel free to say.
we were actually born out of the utility industry.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
utility
grew
industry
up
has
work solving problems mostly with the electric power grid and keeping it secure, both domestically and internationally. And what ended up happening was we've worked for a number of the different agencies, the IC and others, including the White House, developing new concepts, spinning them off. We've worked with NIST to come up with new approaches to cybersecurity and then to implement them so that you can change organization culture and that you can actually get to where you need to be in cyber. The problem with cyber today is I watch what's happening, and on one side, we're getting much more technical. We're getting to the root of the problem. We're getting down to what needs to be done. On the other hand, the administrivia, the amount of overhead that we're putting into cyber is going up tremendously. The complexity is going up. So I look at some of the requirements and standards that are coming out today, and they make it very difficult for someone to implement cost effectively. And cyber has to be cost effective. Also, cyber has become a big issue with ensuring that you can not only meet your mission requirements, but that you can do it realistically. Because what's happened is cyber is a big discriminator. It's no longer an add-on. So if I look at quality in the 70s, and I look at, I know I'm off topic. If I look at quality in the 70s, there are a lot of parallels to the car industry where it was added on and not included in. Cyber has to be integrated, and we're starting to do that, but we haven't really gone far enough. When I talk to people in high-ranking people, C-suite people, and a lot of the high-level agencies, intelligence community, as well as the civilian agencies, they talk about changing the culture, changing behavior so that people are more cyber aware. That's a significant issue. And a lot of what I see happening is we're working at one end with the technology, making it more sensitive, being able to pick up some of the bad guys faster and more effectively, but we're not changing the culture so that other people aren't really looking for those issues. And we need to do that. This is all about risk. And the question is, how do we reduce the risk? And how do we make sure that it makes sense? You're never going to eliminate it completely. And the question is, what level of risk is also acceptable? What's your risk tolerance or your risk appetite organizationally? And we haven't defined that. So we have no aiming points. I mean, the way I look at it with a lot of the organizations that we work with, we talk to them about, helping their executives determine what their risk appetite or tolerance is, and then having them take it and tailor it specifically to their mission, whether it's a warfighting mission or it's a civilian mission, it's health. Our strength is really in the financial industry, the health sector, and the energy industry, besides some of the intelligence work we've done.
So are there good metrics for quality, effectiveness, performance, both in risk, as you're saying, and also in reaction for that matter? And, hand in hand with metrics go standards for methods. We've been working on this stuff for a long time, decades. What's the state of metric standards and all of those kind of things across the different agencies and industries? You're chuckling.
You're actually asking a rather, it's a simple question, but a complex answer.
Oh, good.
So the state of metrics is not where it needs to be. I mean, I will tell you that we worked YDK. We came up with the concept of ops for YDK Center for the White House. But then we also worked for the Critical Infrastructure Assurance Office afterwards. That was Dick Clark's old organization. A lot of the approaches and techniques used there for supply chain, looking at interdependency analysis, looking for single points of contact and weaknesses within organizations and entities. We piloted those concepts then, and I haven't seen a lot of that evolving past where we went then to now. So there are a lot of things that you can do. Metrics is another question. Most metrics that I've seen are following metrics. So you have an incident and you say, oh, that's a bad thing that happened. How many bad things have happened to me? Sorry, I'm waving my hands around. You can't see it. Anyway, the issue is not coming up with the following metrics, but having a balanced set of metrics that looks forward. So what are my goals? What do I metricize to drive performance in that area, as well as where I am now and where I've been? So, I don't know, have you ever heard of the balanced scorecard that's used in business schools? It comes out of Harvard Business.
It's funny. I've heard about it, and it used to be the rage in the worlds that I inhabit most of the time, customer service, support, marketing,
Right.
and all of that. But I actually haven't heard a whole lot about it in a number
Well,
of
I mean,
years.
it's, the Gardner uses, a lot of other people use a magic quadrant. We've used a similar approach with cybersecurity. When I first started System One, what I basically did is our early experience in System One was working with utilities that had gotten into problems. We helped fix the organizations. We helped fix the problems. I mean, I can't discuss specifics, but I can tell you we were brought in where the boards of directors were ready to shut down whole operations, and we were given the task of finding what was wrong and fixing it. So I called it find and fix, and it worked out very well. It was actually pretty fun work. When we came into the government, we were doing the same thing. We were brought in by the Secretary of Energy to help solve some problems that they had. And the issue is, how do you drive performance? So coming up with ways to metricize things, we developed for NIST the Prisma, which was an early cybersecurity maturity model to drive performance and then measure performance. It was used by a number of agencies and a large number of private sector groups. It became the dashboard whereby a lot of the other dashboards grew out of it later. We did the studies on return on security investment for the government. We've done some really interesting things you would never have heard of because we're a small entity, but we do pretty interesting types of stuff. I mean, we've been brought into different countries to work, but I'm getting off the topic. Going back to metrics, metrics are always a tough issue. And you have to know.
John, this is Sally.
Sure.
John, you're one of my favorite people in the whole world. So thank you so much, Seth, for inviting John to talk. John, we only have 10 more minutes. I do want to touch upon 3 big issues before I go with Seth. One is, I do want you to talk about the supply chain issue, which you and I have reviewed. Can you just talk about how important that is to the artificial intelligence machine learning community to speed up looking at that theater, and certainly what we're going to do about it with the agencies as far as contractors and subcontractors?
Well, I was just on a call with Department of State about their clean approach. Are you guys familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay.
I wouldn't assume that the attendees are. I'm not myself.
Okay, so this is an approach where a number of companies are working with state and other government agencies and coming up with clean supply chains so they can say, my gear, my equipment is basically blessed. A lot of it is aimed at some of the Asian companies aligned with Chinese intelligence. Let's put it that way. I can talk about that.
Let's call it, for the consumer markets, the TikTok problem.
Yeah, well, that and others, right. So, I mean, the whole idea is to go down the supply chain and make sure that we're not giving away, our jeweled crown. I mean, we've seen this in a lot of other areas. It's not only true in electronics, but you see it in almost any of these 16 or 18 infrastructure areas have similar problems. The one thing that's been added to it in IT and AI is there's a tremendous amount of competition right now in AI ML with the Chinese, not so much with the Russians, but with the Chinese are putting a lot of emphasis on that. They see that as a big force multiplier. So we've got to stay ahead of that. And supply chain is part of that, making sure that we can both protect our intellectual property and that as we build more and more equipment, devices, accoutrements, electronic accoutrements, that we are making sure that that equipment is clean so it's not reporting back home, or there'll be common mode failures, or a half dozen other things I could name quickly.
Sure.
Thank you so much, John. That was absolutely brilliant. I love hearing you. I think that Seth should be speaking with you again. I think you have a lot to contribute to the community, and we appreciate your support of Maryland TEDCO and Maryland AI.
Thank you.
I do want to close with 2 thoughts today. before today, Seth and I were discussing work. There could be some attendees here today in the healthcare realm. I did want to talk about Lucd.AI, my company's involvement with COVID right now.
Right.
We are involved with an early predictive model approach called Project Salus with the Jake. And we're looking at individual level of infection rates to better mitigate responses, schools, hospitals, airports, first responder locations. This COVID project that we're working on, we're also working on with other entities, with the data coming in and looking at that one pane of glass platform viewing point. So I will keep this group apprised of our COVID work. And on a closing note, I'd love to share with you one of the big percentage of my day that I spend is to give back to the community, impact give back. I believe in supporting women's leadership initiatives, not only in cybersecurity with the Cyber Day on Capitol Hill, but right now I am supporting women in AI, ML leadership positions in the federal agencies in their data science offices. We have a new women's group called Data on Deck, and we look forward to keeping Seth's community involved and invited to hopefully when we all get back and healthy again soon in our community. But I love that I am empowering and rising up the next generation of women data scientists. So on that note, thank you for sharing my love of strengthening women's role in technology and sharing my work in cyber, artificial intelligence, machine learning. Thank you, Seth.
Yeah, I think the work with women is especially important. Speaking as a middle-aged white guy, there are plenty of us in this industry, and it's really important for us to use the platform that we have to actively recruit and promote women and diverse participation in general, because there are cultural aspects between women versus men about willingness to step forward and the so-called imposter syndrome. And a lot of men will just barge right ahead with, past any obstacle. And not everyone is like that, let's say. So I'm really glad to hear about what you're doing. If I can get a message out to the meetup and roundtable attendees, I'd be happy to do that if you send me information that I can get out to people and use the platforms that we have available to us to get out information that will help people advance in what they're doing. Your work with women in particular, is that helping them with career advancement, with technical learning, with business savvy, all of the above, trying to help them understand the overall landscape?
I think, Seth, specifically, it is our federal initiative in Washington, D.C., bringing technology leaders in cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, machine learning, data science, the women in North America who have served our country and who are now in Fortune 100 leadership positions as CISOs, CIOs, now CDOs and chief data scientists and analysts. We want to rise them up. We want them to have a voice in Washington, D.C., not only with our federal agencies, but with our homeland leadership at DHS, and certainly on Capitol Hill with our Homeland Security committees and Armed Services committees. We feel that that expertise in technology, their technical acumen in the space, is very relevant to the budget and to policy conversation. And we do believe there should be a diverse voice in Washington, D.C.
This is a really interesting time. We have an election coming up that in a few weeks that will decide what direction the country goes as a whole, and America leads the world still. I'm curious, we've touched on quite a variety of topics in a short time today. Where do you see things going in the federal AI ML world, for women, in the cybersecurity world? If you care to say, I recognize there's a huge amount of uncertainty. Any thoughts you care to share about futures?
I think the biggest thought I have is the leadership does not recognize currently the women leaders of today. And they are all out there in every critical infrastructure, cybersecurity sector, aviation, auto, insurance, finance, pharmaceutical, biotech. The women are in these cybersecurity and data analyst positions, and we'd like to rise them up and make sure that their voice is heard as a technical vertical in all of our areas in Washington, DC. And I do believe it's incredible. I am so proud that every time I turn the page, women are leading in our federal civilian agency space. I think Suzette Kent has really been a force for leadership for all women here in Washington, DC. She was our last big, Chief Information Officer of the United States. And we have a lot of women running our civilian agencies. In fact, Lauren Kassenbacher has just become the Deputy CIO of Air Force. There's a lot of women running a lot of programs here, which we're all very proud of.
Very good. Well, we haven't had participation by the normal attendees and all that. That's okay. There's a lot of material here to absorb, and sometimes it's a bit daunting to jump into a conversation with people who are experts and immersed in this kind of stuff all of the time. But in any case, let me just invite you, if there's anything you want to say by way of a wrap up, things that you are thinking now, oh, I should have said earlier. Well, I'll give you an opportunity to say it now, but anything summative otherwise.
Thank you, Seth. I just want to say I'm very grateful to everyone on the call today and my guests, John and Anna and Marcus. I work with my advisors every day in the space, and I believe it's the team effort. So thank you for letting me be a part of everyone's incredible team.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for participating to you and to the folks that you brought along and to everyone who's attended today. I'm going to be aiming to do a conventional meetup program in the few weeks during November, avoiding the election because that's going to be absorbing a lot of attention. And then we do the roundtable sessions monthly. We may revert to having a pure discussion among our members as opposed to having a program with a guest for our next roundtable session. So if folks want to get in touch with me, I'm about to put my email address into the chat. Feel free to send me a note. I love to talk about anything related to what we're discussing today and a lot more. My own focus is on natural language processing, which has just been mentioned in passing. It's something I really get enthusiastic about, all of this, and it's great having these conversations. So Sally, thanks very much for participating, and to everyone else who has joined us today, and we'll see you, I hope, next time.